I'd like to share with you today what I share with my patients as they come in with their complaints and their state of doubt, confusion, and diseases today. I have discovered that the diagnosis in our society today is a deficiency state, and we are deficient in the information that we are allowing to affect the formation of our body. And that deficiency state is a deficiency of the impact of God's Word on the formation of the structure and function of our body. Information drives the structure and function of the body. When we're surrounded by doubt and fear and anxiety, the structure of our brain and the structure of our DNA is affected. DNA is meant to be symmetrical and is meant to be a crystal. It is a crystal that receives information. And when the DNA, rather than being in a state of symmetry, is in a state of dysfunction, which is what fear and anxiety creates, this crystal of DNA does not receive information that God intended for us to receive. Our brain is filled with neurological networks, and the neurological networks in our brain are meant to be symmetrical, and they're meant to be in synchrony and in tune with the actual heart and mind of God that is telling us His Word. His Word has already been broadcast out into the universe, and our DNA and our neurological networks and our heart and brain receive that information when it is in the correct structure. When our DNA and our brain are out of structure with the information that's in the universe that God injected into the universe in the form of His Word, we cannot receive His Word. So it's not God's Word that has left us. We have left God's Word, and we've left it by allowing outside information to affect the structure and function of our DNA and of our brain. In fact, God's Word says that when the brain is in a patchwork quilt like this, filled with uncertainties and filled with contradictions and filled with uncertainties and filled with doubt, this neurological network is incapable of receiving God's Word, which has been injected and broadcast out into the universe at the time of creation. So we're in this state of dysfunction in our country today and in our personal lives because our DNA has become disformed and the neurological networks in our heart and brain have become disformed. And God's Word even says in it that when you're in a state of double-mindedness, meaning we're in a state of contradiction, we're in a state of paradox, we're in a state of uncertainty, we cannot receive or we cannot even expect to receive from God. And that's why we're missing the peace and tranquility and happiness that we're supposed to be receiving in our lives today. Now, on the other hand, when you expose your DNA and when you expose your brain and heart to God's Word, the symmetry and the structure of the DNA and the symmetry and structure of the neurological networks that in our brain and heart are in tune with and in synchrony with God. And therefore they receive the information of God's Word, which keeps us in a state of peace and in a state of kindness and a state of love and tranquility, and takes us out of that state of doubt, anxiety, and confusion. So this state of deficiency has literally affected the structure and function of the human body by changing our DNA and by changing the structure of the neurological networks that we have in our heart and our brain. And there's only one solution to this condition and deficiency of God's Word that we have, and that solution, that treatment, is mentioned in God's Word in Joshua 1:8, where it states, "The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For when you will make your way prosperous, for when you do, you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage, and not be afraid, nor be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you whenever you go." and wherever you go. So God's word is telling us that he has not left the United States. He has not left us individually. We have left him by allowing ourselves to be affected by the false information and doubtful anxiety and fear-fulfilled information that we have. It's distorted the structure of our DNA. It's distorted the structure of our brains. And the way to rehabilitate our DNA, which is the crystal molecule that receives God's information, and to receive and to reform and to reformat our neurological networks on our heart and brain, is to expose them to the information in God's Word. So my prescription for mankind is to get back into God's Word.